There was a time when saying, "I don't know," sounded like strength.
It makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War.
A marker of seriousness, a sign you'd met the world properly and had been weighed. Now it can sound like failure, or weakness, or worse, disloyalty. Because we are living through something subtle and pervasive, a cultural pressure to flatten reality, to sand down the jagged edges, to make the world simple enough to be portable. This episode is about that pressure, the war on complexity. And before we go further, I need to define a term that I'll keep returning to in this series: the ghost idea. A ghost idea isn't a slogan that people chant. It's rarely said out loud. It's the hidden assumption that sits behind 1,000 choices, in media, in institutions, in everyday conversation. It is the unspoken, silent belief that haunts a culture, shaping behaviour whilst pretending not to exist at all. Think of it like the operating system running in the background. Most people never see it, most people don't understand it, but it governs what feels acceptable, what feels suspicious, and what feels like common sense. In this episode, the ghost idea is simple. It is this: complexity is a threat. Complexity framed as danger. Complexity as something that must be contained, mocked, or even eliminated. And once that ghost idea takes hold, you start to notice its fingerprints everywhere.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
Because a complex world demands slow thinking, trade-offs, uncertainty, second-order effects, and slow thinking is expensive. It costs time, it costs status, it costs belonging, it costs the warm comfort of being absolutely certain. So we simplify, because it's safe. Plato saw the shape of this problem long before social media, long before TV news, long before the modern spectacle. In his Allegory of the cave, people take shadows for reality because shadows are manageable. Shadows are legible. Shadows can be turned into arguments, identities, and moral crusades. The person who turns towards the fire, toward the machinery that produces the shadows, doesn't look to all like a hero. He looks like a threat, because he complicates the picture. That is the war on complexity at its oldest setting. Humans prefer a smaller reality that they can control to a larger reality that they must learn. Now scale that up to modern life. We live inside systems so intricate that no one person can hold them in their head. Supply chains, global finance, healthcare bureaucracy, education policy, energy markets, algorithms, regulatory webs now arrives as layers. But our minds didn't evolve for layers. They evolved for survival stories: predator, ally, rival, tribe. We are in essence narrative machines. And when complexity rises, the story engine switches on. It starts looking for compression. One cause, one villain, one cure, one sentence to end the discomfort. And here is where Zimbardo becomes essential.
A fire could erupt and you could be suffocated or burned to death. It's obvious what you do. But now again, what happens if you're in that same room and there are 10 other people and all of them do nothing? Do you take action when other people define the situation as do nothing rather than do something?
Zimbardo's work, and especially the Stanford prison experiment, is often reduced to a crude takeaway: people are easily controlled. But the deeper point is more precise and more relevant to complexity. When a situation is designed to make moral thinking feel unnecessary, people stop asking complex questions like, what am I doing? What am I becoming? What is the system doing to me? Instead, they simplify and ask these questions. What's my role? What am I allowed to do? What will I be rewarded for? And that's what simplification does. It turns judgment into a procedure. It turns ethics into compliance. It turns thinking into a cost that you cannot afford. And when people stop thinking, not because they're stupid, but because the environment makes thinking feel dangerous, reality becomes negotiable. Hannah Arendt called this thoughtlessness a central danger of modern life. Her phrase, the banality of evil, is often misunderstood. She wasn't saying evil is small, she was saying evil becomes normal when it becomes administrative, when it becomes a job, when it becomes paperwork, when it becomes a role. In that world, you don't need hatred, you only need to stop engaging with complexity. You only need to stop thinking in full sentences.
If you're unvaccinated, it will find you.
The virus is literally finding unvaccinated people.
It will find the unvaccinated.
We're seeing COVID-19 tracking down unvaccinated people.
You know, if you're unvaccinated and you're in circulation,
Complexity is a threat.
You're going to get it.
Pushes people towards systems that promise relief, systems that offer certainty, systems that offer belonging. Uncertainty is addictive. Isaiah Berlin gives us a useful lens, the hedgehog and the fox. The hedgehog knows one big thing, the fox knows many. The hedgehog is made for the age of certainty. One big thing means one big story, one big enemy, one big explanation. It's clean, it's emotionally satisfying, it gives you the feeling of standing on solid ground. The fox is harder to live with. The fox says, well, it depends. The fox says, there are trade-offs. The fox says, your solution will only create new problems. But the war on complexity is, in practice, a war in favour of hedgehogs. And once you reward the hedgehog, you punish the fox. You start to treat nuance as weakness, caveats as cowardice, questions as sabotage. You can see it in how we speak now.
Is there anything you want to show in the crypto industry right now?
Jake Paul was paid $25,019 to shill Utron, and he couldn't even bother to disclose that it was an ad.
To shill Mr. Beast a meme coin.
Shill.
We compress whole human beings into labels: denier, shill, fascist, groomer, woke, extremist. Sometimes labels are descriptively accurate, but their real function is usually simpler. They reduce complexity fast. They allow sorting without actually thinking. Friend or enemy? Safe or unsafe? In our group or out of our group? And once you sort a person, you stop listening. And once you stop listening, you stop updating. And once you stop updating, you begin to live inside a static model of the world. Now we hit the modern accelerator. A complex truth is usually slow, conditional, and unsatisfying. A simple story, however, is fast, absolute, and emotionally rewarding.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The attention economy pays for reward. Platforms optimize for engagement, and engagement is driven by emotions that don't tolerate complexity: outrage, fear, humiliation, and triumph. These emotions demand verdicts, not investigation. So incentives tilt against complexity. And once incentives tilt, institutions tilt too. Journalism shortens, politics hardens, education narrows, workplace culture turns disagreement into a risk. Friendship becomes brittle because people start treating each other as ideological hazards. Which brings us back to Plato again, only with a modern twist. The cave is no longer one room, it's personalised. Each person gets their own shadows, their own fire, and their own feed. And when you live inside a personalised cave, complexity becomes not just difficult, but suspicious, because complexity implies there are unseen variables, competing explanations, motives that you cannot summarise, evidence that refuses to be clean. So the ghost idea returns as moral instinct. Complexity equals threat.
Get somebody to blow up a bus full of children or a building full of innocent civilians. You have to grind it into their minds. You have to wash their brains and tell them there is a higher cause out there. It's religious, ethnic, racial, whatever.
Now, in a sane culture, complexity would be treated as reality's signature, a sign you're near the truth. But in a frightened culture, complexity is treated as a hostile act. Stop overthinking. Stop making it complicated. Just say what you mean. Pick a side. The demand is not for understanding, it's for allegiance. And allegiance changes the function of speech. Speech stops being a tool for discovering what's true. It becomes a tool for signalling who you are.
If you feel safe around someone, you can start to trust someone. If you feel safe in a community, you can start to trust that community. If you feel safe in a country, you can start to trust that country.
Because here is the real consequence of the war on complexity. It doesn't merely shift opinion. It doesn't merely simplify opinions. It simplifies perception itself. It changes what people can even notice. If complexity is treated as danger, people retreat into narratives that protect them. Not necessarily lies, often just curated fragments, emphasised truths, missing context, selective outrage, convenient certainty. And when enough people do it at once, something breaks. Not with a dramatic moment, but with a slow drift away from shared standards. What counts as evidence, what words mean, what fact even is. Which is where this episode has to end. The question isn't who is wrong, it's more unsettling. If we train ourselves to fear complexity and reward ourselves for simplification, what happens when different groups simplify the same world in opposite directions? When each side lives in a different cave, watching different shadows under different rules, and calling it reality. If complexity becomes unbearable, can shared reality survive, or does truth itself become tribal?